Hello, and thank you for joining us at Blue Hornet's 2014 Consumer Views of Email Marketing webinar series. I'm Emily Strasberg, Email Marketing Manager here at Blue Hornet. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please submit any questions you have during the presentation using the chat window. We will be answering all questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and we'll send out the recording and slide presentation for you to download in the next few days. Let's get started. For the third consecutive year, Blue Hornet has surveyed more than 1,000 consumers across the U.S. to better understand their behavior and sentiments about email marketing. Today is the fifth webinar in our six-part series, Email and Mobile Devices. We'll be taking a dive into the data to provide you with insights and practical recommendations for your email program based on the research. Our speakers today are Brian Banks, Client Services Account Director, and John Bilderbach, Senior Creative Designer. Before we get started, we wanted to remind you to listen carefully. At the end of our presentation, we'll provide you with our Twitter topic for today. At the end of the presentation, we'll ask you a question to answer on Twitter. Make sure to tweet your responses in the next 24 hours to @BlueHornetEmail with the hashtag 2014 email stats for a chance to win an email consultation. Walk away with 3 to 5 tips on how to optimize your program based on the findings from the 2014 Consumer Views of Email Marketing Trends. Brian, take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, over the course of the last 3 years, Blue Hornet has conducted consumer surveys allowing us to couple behavioral information regarding consumer interaction with email alongside self-reported perception regarding use of the channel. So in order to obtain the most comprehensive view of the data, we partnered with Flagship to survey a panel of just a little over 1,300 consumers across the U.S. And this year we opened up the age range from 18 to 75. I think previously it was maybe capping out around 45, 50. So some cool stats that we uncovered this year as a result. So we wanted to cover off on some key categories, including an understanding of consumer email habits, preferences around frequency and message relevance, the influence email has on purchasing behavior, how consumers interact with email on mobile devices, and finally, which will be next 2 weeks from now, the webinar on the intersection of email, social, and SMS. So today we're going to focus on survey findings as it relates to mobile behavior. And then on our next webinar, dive deeper into email as it relates to social and texting. Again, the goal of this series is not just to tell you what we found and regurgitate a bunch of stats that you could download in a PDF, but to augment that with why marketers like you should care and how it impacts the approach to the channel and how to leverage this information to drive your programs, particularly as we go into the holiday here. So, again, as I mentioned today, we focused on email as it relates to mobile devices. Our questions focused around the types of mobile devices our respondents use, what and why they're using them for, what they don't use them for, how they interact with email on their devices, etc. And today our key takeaways will revolve around the actual devices being used and what these devices can tell us about your audience and vice versa. And this will also help us find the right mobile design strategy for your audience as well as how that design strategy jives with your resources and skill set. Lastly, we'll take a look at new technologies you can leverage to take your mobile email strategy to the next level. So let's jump into this content, starting with the mobile landscape. So there have been a lot of great studies regarding mobile usage as it relates to email. Last year, as part of their 2013 market share stats, Litmus charted the open rates across desktop, mobile, and webmail. And no surprise, mobile open rates continue to be the main source of email opens across the 3 platforms. And over the last 12 months, mobile has actually taken a significant share away from webmail. And of course, these stats are just the average of an industry, not really specific to a vertical and such. So, it's going to vary from brand to brand, vertical to vertical, with your audience demographic playing a huge part in this. So, I think one thing we're going to stress throughout this webinar is you really need to understand who you're dealing with, and because that's going to drive your mobile strategy and kind of increase the relevance of mobile as it relates to your program. So I guess some more food for thought, this time from Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers' 2013 Internet Trends. And through their study, they came up with the statistic that the average user checks their smartphone an average of 150 times a day, which kind of boils down to once about every 7 minutes. That's kind of a crazy stat. Kind of makes you wonder when and how the average person here who checks their phone every 7 minutes gets anything done. Having kids, that would make it even more difficult, speaking from experience there. Lastly, as is published in our 2013 Consumer Reviews of Email Marketing Report, only 7.2% of subscribers are engaging with an email on 2 platforms. Kind of putting to bed the trend we were seeing previously where people were using mobile devices to triage their emails. Now that mobile is the new norm, and users are used to getting a solid experience on their mobile device, the desktop double take is going the way of the dodo. So when it comes to opening email on desktop or mobile, it's really one or the other. So you've got one shot to make it count. And luckily for us, we have an expert who can provide some instruction on that later. Talking about you, John. Oh. Why is that? So we're getting, let's see here. Sorry about that, guys. It looks like we've been stuck on the Twitter slide. We're moving forward. So I'll kind of breeze through these again. Sorry for that little technical difficulty. This is where we're talking about the litmus stats. Furthermore, kind of, again, rehashing how mobile has kind of been the dominant force lately, surpassing webmail. Again, here's that stat from Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers regarding the kind of the every 7 minutes trend. And lastly, from our 2013 report, to 7.2 subscribers. So sorry about that little technical difficulty. Looks like we got hung up there, but I think now we are caught up. Cool. So, as I mentioned, there have already been a ton of mobile usage surveys, and we've all heard stats like, 90% of American adults have a cell phone, 58% of American adults, have a certain device, 42% of Americans own a tablet computer, and so forth. So we use this survey to better understand which types of devices our respondents use/owned, and this year we asked, which type of smartphone do you use or own? Our respondents came back with a near 50-50 split, which pretty much mirrored a recent Consumer Intelligence Research Partners report, which found Apple conversely slightly ahead of Android. And as for tablets, iPad's still taking the lion's share there. And I imagine this aligns with what you've been seeing elsewhere. So rather than just add to the sea of mobile usage stats, and even worse, bore you nice people, let's talk about why these stats even matter and how we could leverage these learnings to improve our email programs. Ultimately, the main takeaway here is that there are a lot of devices out there, each with their own mail apps and ways of rendering your emails. So you better make sure you have a mobile design strategy that can account for the myriad device app permutations. And of course, as always, test. And with a lot of great options to test your inbox rendering on different browsers and email clients, there's no excuse not to drop your email code into something like Email on Acid or Litmus. And John, you're a huge fan of Email on Acid and one of the major proponents here at BH that made them a strategic partner. And I guess we'll actually be integrating that into our platform in the near future. Why would you recommend something like Email on Acid to someone testing the creative?
One, it's super easy. So you can grab the code and you can drop it into their interface and run the test and look at a report that would account for not just a browser-based email in each browser iteration. So you can test for Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer with each of the webmail clients, Hotmail, Gmail, Yahoo. The list goes on and on from there, as well as you can test desktop clients, be they the oldie moldy Lotus Notes, all the way up through the most current Apple iteration, as well as all of the Microsoft standard Outlook platforms. On top of that, you've got all of the mobile device testing that you can do. So one-stop shopping, you don't have to have a mobile lab or a testing department where you have all of these things laying all around your desk. You can actually blast your code into them, click test, walk away, grab a cup of coffee, come back, and within minutes you've got a full rendering report that you can start saying, oh, look, here's where it renders well, here's where it doesn't render well.
Awesome. They have like 59 different options or something crazy like that, right?
Yeah, the combination is kind of big and endless because you can test into a number of different theories. If you've got a mobile-only offer and you want to see that specifically for mobile devices, you could turn off all the other desktop clients and you could see that just for the mobile. So there's a number of choices that you can make.
Absolutely. And again, depending on your demographic, let's say your bread and butter were subscribers at maybe private domains that are going to be heavily loaded with Outlook clients, right? That would be kind of a great place to really focus your energy there because obviously Outlook does a lot of weird, quirky stuff with your emails.
Correct. Yeah, they all have their own quirks for sure. Especially that some of the mobile apps render differently than the desktop apps, or even on one platform, Android versus iPhone or iOS. So between those two, you're going to have some quirks between them. So it's good to test into each one of them. And with its ease of use, you can actually email. I know you can email directly from the Blue Hornet platform. I do it day in, day out, sending test accounts for each client, and you can see them render and get the rendering report right there. And I know Litmus, not to just to play no favorites here in the house, so Litmus offers a very similar reporting structure. And they offer some very similar testing as well. So
awesome. Well, cool. Speaking of design, I know we're going to kind of dig into this a little bit more. In this section, we'll be kind of looking into different ways to take this information that we learned from the survey and create designs that set our emails up for success. So, as this question's response tells us, the likelihood of your non-mobile friendly email making it to an open is pretty slim. We asked our respondents what they did with an email that didn't look good on their mobile device, and 71% responded that they would flat out delete it, which is actually a best case scenario when compared to the second highest response, which was unsubscribed, coming in at 6.3%. 12.5% of respondents were a little bit more forgiving and would give it a second chance, while 7.3% copped to not getting emails on their mobile device at all. I guess that's a result of us opening up our age range of respondents to 75, I guess, this year. So,
probably so.
Maybe that's why. Furthermore, beyond an interaction with an individual email that doesn't have a mobile design strategy, you could be hurting yourself in the long run. We asked, how does a poorly designed email affect your perception of the brand? And that's, at large. And 75% of respondents said that ugly emails reflect poorly on a brand. Again, piled all these learnings up, and they point to the same thing. Get a mobile design strategy. And again, luckily for us on this webinar, we have John, who's going to kind of navigate our options and break down some ideas to help us find the right strategy for our respective brands.
All right. Well, let's talk about some design options first, and then we can kind of parlay or go back to some of the stats and how they relate to what's good branding and what's a good mobile practice. So on your screens now, you should see the one-size-fits-all campaign. I'm going to talk about two particular styles that I see trending out in the marketplace. They come in a number of flavors, sizes, colors. Really, it's so very client to client. And this one happens to be the one-size-fits-all, which is really more like a traditional billboard. If you can imagine a billboard, it's got one big image, it's got one big message. It's not focused on compartmentalization or having a bunch of sub-offers. It's really about the one big presentation. For this sample, I was telling Brian before our call that I felt a little bad that I needed some new material because it seems that I promote Victoria's Secret quite a bit. But they're a great example of this one big billboard, one big offer, one big message. And it's a clear example of doing something that's branded very well, has all the great chops as far as a great email campaign, and they produce these, send them twice a day, have been sending twice a day for quite some time now. So this one-size-fits-all is great. Again, the characteristics, single column, it's got great big text, it's limited in its actual text. So these are this is text that's actually on the image. That it just has a nice, simple format.
Yeah, it's simple, but super focused, right?
Right, super focused. It's ideal for, again, the concise offer for showcasing a great image. Again, just to bring in some new blood to the mix here, we've got Victoria's Secret, which is really great for their images, but also we've got JBL and Patagonia. I actually looked at them this morning in my test inbox and was just going through, and I was like, these guys are pretty sharp. I love what they're doing. So, again, something, if you're interested, you should go out and sign up for those, and you can try to discern how their program might reflect or impact your program. And you can actually look at these in the mobile devices and see how well they render. Again, this is just a big postcard email. And I really think that it's great for rapid deployment, provided you've got the right resources, which we'll talk about after the next slide.
Yeah, of course. A couple of things to call out. I know I always bring this up as like the navigation. On their website they have like 20, or not 20, but maybe 12 or so different categories. They really drill it down and give you just a handful. It's, again, laser focused, and maybe this is a result of segmentation, your past purchase behavior, or what have you. But again, I guess that fits within this particular pixel width, right? For this.
Right. So this design is about 520 pixels wide. That's pretty average. So if I were designing this, I would probably stick to the 5 to 520 pixels wide in terms of my design palette. And that gives me a balance of doing a big image that I know is going to present well across any of the web clients, because it's, again, just a big billboard. Now, the smart things that they do, of course, like you were saying, was the branding up top, the navigation, and they may, on the desktop version, offer more navigation, but in the mobile view, they would actually hide some of the navigation. So it's definitely an option if they're not doing it in each particular campaign. I know I've seen them do it in the past. JBL offers a very similar approach where they've got just a few big branded buttons or big branded links that they put across the top, and that's what they offer. Tend to rotate those or move those through based on segmentation, saying, oh, this guy has purchased this device, or this person has purchased this device, and so you could change up the navigation if you're doing segmentation.
Very cool. So maybe if this is a real focused and single call to action, you probably get a little bit more out of the responsive design then.
Right. So the step up, the Cadillac here, is this responsive design. So where the other one is a little more fixed in terms of width, and you allow the device to actually scale it in each device or each email client. This is a responsive layout where it has some magic HTML, CSS code in the head of the document that would refactor the design to fit the screen size. And there would be a minimum width and a maximum width. You can have a number of what are called breakpoints. Breakpoints being, the smallest screen size is this, a medium screen size is this, and the largest screen size is this. And so you can actually take this design and refactor it down where you've got two columns, and maybe column A and column B. Column B drops down below column A when it refactors for the small screen. The great thing about this is that it's fluid width, that it can adjust, or you can swap imagery. There's a number of technical items where you can actually scale images, you can crop images differently, you can just be displaying a larger image in the mobile than you might display in the desktop, if you will. Just from a design standpoint, you're trying to show things a little bit differently. That you can have text and text-based buttons, and that, again, dynamically changing the layout, which means that you can move things around and display mobile-only offers or recolorize certain sections to give a different presentation in the mobile experience.
Super cool.
So what this is ideal for, again, multiple columns, multiple offers. It's great for a newsletter format. I can't say that it's ideal in all scenarios for all newsletters. There are scenarios that perhaps this isn't built for when you've got, we'll call it tons of text, lines and lines of text. Of course, it'll refactor down. It's just that email is perhaps not the best platform to be displaying reams of text on there. It could be a very content-rich design, and it's definitely great for mobile-friendly offers. So you can hide and show. When it refactors down from a desktop to a mobile, you can actually display a mobile-only offer. Now, go back to our trends. As we see at the head of the presentation, not everyone is actually doing email triage any longer. So if they're reaching for their device every 7 minutes and they're doing email checks on their mobile device, they're probably not double-checking the email on the desktop client. I know my own behavior is switched quite a bit where I'm just doing email on my mobile device. It doesn't interrupt my Photoshop or HTML work that I'm doing. I'm actually looking at my email on my phone and then deleting it and responding or doing what I need to with it from there. So from an offer standpoint, I'm probably just looking at the mobile version. And when I do note that there's a client or a particular brand that I see providing a desktop version on my phone, I make note of that as far as, oh, that's a lack of a mobile strategy, which probably isn't giving them the best presentation. That kind of sets them back in my mind of, oh, wait, I had to scale this up to see it. I couldn't read it as nicely as I could if this were how I might have designed it as a responsive layout or a single column billboard design.
So, I think there are obviously a lot more moving pieces in the responsive design strategy. Maybe you could walk us through some of the pros and cons from like a resources and tech-savvy perspective on helping people attending the webinar, which one might be the better strategy for them if they haven't really.
Yeah, right on. Great question. And thinking about that last night, I kind of broke this into 3 components. So we've got design, we've got the technical component, and then I put the last pieces, marketing, or what we'll call it copy or story or brand. And that should really precede everything. Is that you should be coming up with a great story. And having a great story is really going to drive great design, and it's going to drive the great strategy. So having that great story is going to differentiate you from the competition, and it's going to help you become memorable. So, and it's not that you have to set this bar every single email to be so memorable or do something that's a hallmark moment with every email. It's the fact that you're taking steps to present the best of the best. We'll call it time out over time or time, every other instance, whatever it might be. And I think that it starts to set the bar as far as your own organization or your own brand and how you reach out to people. From a design standpoint, the resources on this, again, if the story is there, usually when you hand that off to the designer, they can actually make a better design from that. So in the first instance, where we've got the one-size-fits-all, a designer, I would imagine the resources that were required for that would be the story, but there's also the design components where it's very much more Photoshop heavy. So I'm going to put all my text and images in Photoshop, and I'm going to deliver a template or an email that's actually very image heavy. And it being image heavy, I have more options as far as clarity or even some of the glossy subjects that I might be able to do. And
the types of fonts.
Types of fonts, exactly. So there's no limit there. So that presents very well. On the other side of that, the technical side for that one-size-fits-all, it's a little bit lower. Actually, it's quite a bit lower. It's way more standard than typical of what we're doing just a few years ago, where it doesn't have the same weight technically as the responsive design. So that one's probably the easiest, and it's more on the designer side of it needing those types of resources. And
it'd be like a trade-off for responsive. So on on the one-size-fits-all, we're talking more heavy on the creative. A lot of thought needs to go into it, and making sure your message gets delivered appropriately. And on the other side, you probably need a little bit more tech-savvy, at least on the initial template. Maybe you could get it to a point where there's a solid template, and then the day-to-day contact who is updating it with maybe new stories or new products, what have you. If you give them a good framework, they could go in there and change out some images. If you comment things out and kind of leave some breadcrumbs for them, I imagine.
Breadcrumbs, good call out. Yeah, so the responsive one does take a little bit more technical know-how. Again, I will say that it's all preceded by having a great story, presenting the brand in the best light that you can present it. And then from a design resource, I would imagine that if our images, much like the sample that we're seeing on screen right now is Slacker, you've got a couple of, we'll call them boxed images. They're typical photo frames that fit a certain size. They're the same size desktop and mobile or similar size desktop and mobile. Then those are a little bit easier to churn out with a little less thought as that one size fits all, because the rest of the template is augmented by HTML text buttons that are rather flexible and reformatable when it refactors from one screen to the other, as well as in this format, the technical resources scaling up a little bit starts to say, oh, well, I can do things with a mobile-only offer, or a mobile-only button, or a mobile-only section, or I can take advantage of the iOS Retina display, and I can display images that need a little bit more size. And some of the clients that we've been working with actually provide images that are twice the natural size, what we may have done just a few years ago. And so we use the HTML to actually refactor those down and then present it for the best size in whatever scenario.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool, like really taking advantage of these really awesome displays that we have in our hand. And I think the rule of thumb or the normal is 72 DPI, and now you're getting 150, 300 DPI, and then shrinking them down and having them really large and kind of mouth-watering when they hit your device, right?
Right, yeah, that's a good call, mouth-watering. The other side of that would be, gee, how long do those take to download? So from a technical standpoint, there's always the caveat of, this is too big and it shouldn't be an email, especially on the mobile device. Not that we're seeing a lot of, we'll call it weight going through the pipe to your phone where suddenly your email takes minutes to download. We're still seeing downloads happen especially on great emails, they tend to download very quickly and display very rapidly on the phone. So it's good to be prudent with the image size that you're presenting and not to overwhelm the inbox.
Yeah. Do you have maybe a rule of thumb or a threshold where you say, hey, when you start getting to 200 kilobytes, you're pushing it, or is there something like that you'd recommend? Or
yeah, I'm smiling because it's kind of funny. We have a inbox that we kind of monitor a number of emails, and we get emails that are in there from the 15K range all the way up to the 3 megabyte massive emails.
Sweet Lord.
Yeah, exactly. So at 3 megabytes, I would say that that's definitely a no-no. That's out there a little bit. That's too much on my phone. But certainly the 500K, I'm not afraid of saying that that's probably okay.
And that's total images within an email?
Yeah, so that would be a total email. So if I look at the HTML file or I run a report, it actually tells me, this email, its weight equals 500K or 700K.
Cool.
And at that, I would venture a guess that if my story were really compelling and I was doing something super awesome and it loaded appropriately, I wouldn't be afraid to push that boundary a little bit more, knowing that there's some wow factor in there.
Yeah, maybe if you were a photographer, you were email marketer for a gallery, and that was really important to really have that crisp detail in the images. Maybe that's where it's like, okay, maybe I could get a little bit more heavy on the sides to really drive my message home and generate some interest. Cool.
So as far as the layouts go, the responsive layout is definitely a little more dynamic layout, where as the icon shows up there, you've got kind of a 2x1 column, and then when it refactors down, it kind of drops column A below column B. It's kind of amazing, and again, with people only looking at emails on their phone, they no longer see the desktop version. And so there's not a comparison any longer. And there's a new cast of email marketing that's really focused just on the mobile side of things. So they only see emails from the mobile lens. They never really looked at it from the, this is how, historically, this is how it's been on the desktop. So, it's just an awareness thing to know that, with responsive, we can move some columns around. And you may not be seeing the same display presentation that you would see on the desktop or on another device or on your screen.
Cool. And then you mentioned this thing is more is relevant to maybe one size fits all, but also within responsive. But you talk about text sizes and making sure that they're legible, particularly when they are image-based.
Yeah, so image sizes or text sizes on an image when they're image-based, like the billboard or the one-size-fits-all, it's great to keep in mind that screen scaling is going to affect your image, and if you're putting 12-point text on, it's going to probably get scaled down on whatever device, and when it gets scaled down, that text is going to be rather unreadable. So it came up with a couple of, we'll call them generic sizes, but these are kind of rules of thumb. When I start designing, this was like, this looks good. Based on the font, this might be a good size, or I need to go up or down from here based on treatment, brand, and other expectations I might have. So from a headline standpoint, I would shoot for the 24 pixels. From a body text standpoint, I'm going to say 14 to 16, and that depends on whether you're serifed or sans serif, and where that might land on the image.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes you have maybe an image that spans 600 or 700 pixels, and you have the bulk of the image on one side, and then you have maybe a column of text. And when that refactors down, that text in one column becomes illegible and really serves no purpose on a mobile device. So, I see that regularly with some of my clients. I need to kind of educate them and move them away from that strategy. But.
Yeah, the subtext to that is it's great to do things. We can think columnar, where we've got two columns left and right, but maybe it's better to start thinking about it in terms of rows. We find that row-based email renders better, it looks better, it's easier to actually navigate and manage because, again, think about your actions on your phone. You get this very vertical format where you're used to seeing things span a smaller screen, but they're taller. So you're used to swiping. So that makes it much more friendly in the row factor. So if you had your image, rather than doing a side-by-side, I would actually move your text down below, where maybe you've got the image and then a block of text down below. And we've seen that as quite a big trend for a number of clients, where they're moving from this column format. So again, text sizes, I would go body text, it's 14 and 16. And then the legal indicia stuff, I would start, just minimize it at the 12 point. Doesn't need to be much bigger than that. Now, of course, if you're using the responsive version, you can set your font sizes and test into how that's going to display on whatever device, however you're looking at it. Be sure and use a real-world device.
Yeah.
And, always be looking at it. So.
Very cool. So mobile rendering gets us to where we ought to be in the mobile world. This next section will provide some insight on how you get ahead or stay ahead of the curve. So it may not be a surprise that our respondents use their smartphones for a variety of activities, from phone calls, a big shocker there, to daily deal sites. Consumers have an omni-channel device in their pockets at all times. And ultimately, there's a lot of opportunity for cross-channel synergies. Email promoting social and app usage, and vice versa. Mobile websites and SMS driving email acquisitions. And a brand that I've seen do this well is Tilly's, and I'm noticing that we never added that slide in here, but I guess I could visually walk you through that. But essentially, in their emails, by using dynamic content that could key off data variable, specifically around whether one of their email subscribers has downloaded the app, Tilly's emails will display or hide a banner which promotes that app. So which is great. So let's say they really want to push their app. There's going to be a big yellow button in there if I don't have it to do so, and if I already have it, maybe they'll provide another banner or they'll just omit it. It's very cool, and you could always take this to the next level. Services like Movable Ink or Live Clicker can actually detect the operating system, and so if you're opening on an Android device, maybe it'll have a specific download this on the Android App Store with a link to it. And conversely, if I'm opening on an iPhone, it's going to do the same thing, but with Apple imagery and a link to the App Store. So, again, reiterating the findings on this page, consumers are engaging with brands on a number of mobile channels, through their emails, through social media, through their mobile websites and brand apps and SMS. And as new technologies emerge, they're going to engage there too. And one such technology that is still gaining momentum after its release a couple of years ago is Apple's Passbook. And it's even getting a little bit more play now that Apple Pay, the iPhone 6 is released and Apple Pay is becoming a part of that. You could store that credit card information in there. So to better understand how consumers have adopted the use of this app, we asked if any of them had used Passbook in the last 6 months. And overall, we had almost 25% of respondents reply in the affirmative. So obviously, this is a question where age would have a lot of bearing. And as you can see, this is an app most popular with 25 to 45-year-olds. Not so much with the 66 and up crowd. So if that's your target demographic, you might want to allocate marketing dollars elsewhere. But for the most part, respondents are using Passbook for coupon storing and redemption, but also for boarding passes, payment info, and movie tickets. And I think this was taken before the iPhone 6 release. But I think if we did this next year, if Apple Pay takes off as much as Apple would probably like it, and other people who want to get rid of their wallets altogether, maybe there'll be a larger number of respondents saying that they use it for that as well. And as this graph shows, it really seems like we've gone full circle with this webinar series talking about coupons. It's basically come up in 5 of 5 webinars, and I imagine it's going to come into conversation on the next. So we've discussed that they are the primary driver of email subscriptions, that they are the primary reason for email engagements, and now we're seeing that they're also the primary use for Passbook. So how can the email marketer leverage this to augment their current programs and enhance the experience for their iPhone subscribers? Well, for one, we could take a note from a brand like Famous Footwear, who incorporate an add to Passbook call to action in their emails. Subscribers will click through a page where they could quickly download the PK Pass file and save it to their Passbook for in-store redemption. So if you're a brick and mortar location, this might be kind of cool. And I like this because it keeps things convenient and easy for your subscriber. There's no need to print the coupon, no need to, store that coupon in your purse or wallet or what have you, and, no need to dig through your inbox at the checkout stand to kind of pull up maybe a QR code or a barcode that may be in the email. So again, I think I've talked about this on other webinars. It's in kind of a movement as of late where it's offering utility, making adding value to that relationship, making things easier, and keeping it simple for your subscribers. Another brand who leverages Passbook is Sephora. They add the Passbook option in a different way. Rather than going and downloading an individual coupon, they're leveraging it to promote their loyalty program via persistent secondary navigation in their footer. So it's a constant reminder to engage in another capacity along with their social and mobile app. And of course there are Android and Windows options as well, such as Pass Wallet and Samsung Wallet. So if you are, if you end up, trying to test Passbook out and see what kind of redemption you get, if you're seeing positive results there, you could test into these other options as well and see how you can improve your experience in coupon redemption for, Android and Windows phone users as well. So in addition to understanding how respondents use new mobile functionalities like Passbook, we also wanted to better understand how they engage with geo-targeting. We asked our respondents, would you enable location targeting if phone applications requested it? and a little over half were open to it. 15 saying yes, and 37% saying they'd consider it. To me, this is kind of a loaded question, and to look at the results in another light, 85% of people would not share their location or need some convincing. And I think I'd probably fall on that. There's a lot of trust involved, and I guess it makes sense in the sense that this is some pretty private information, and you really have to trust a brand to share that data. I even have friends that are reluctant to share their locations via Find My Friends, as part of a group text chain. You have the ability to turn it off after an hour or disable it, but even then, it's kind of new territory, and people aren't really there, and even to someone that they would trust like me or other friends, they're still a little reluctant. So for a brand to kind of say, hey, share your location with me, you're going to need to have a lot in that quote-unquote emotional piggy bank, I guess. So, if you want to add something like this to your program and are ready to start asking your customers to allow geo-targeting, you better have a pretty good track record. And that starts with things as little as your emails looking good, featuring relevant data or personalization in those emails, respecting the frequency options in those programs, all the data that you've requested from your subscriber, whether it's through your preference center or progressive profiling, make sure you're respecting that. And if you're asking for something, use it to enhance their experience, and make that email a little bit more one-to-one and customized so they feel like they're getting something out of the relationship. And of course, this bleeds into bigger items like having a solid social presence and making sure you have strong customer reviews online. Because in the end, you're really going to have to earn and maintain that level across all channels for you to kind of maintain that trust. It's like that saying goes, it's really hard to earn people's trust, and it's really easy to lose it. I kind of, as a father, drive that home with my kids regularly. So, good advice. So anyways, while you may need permission to offer geo-targeting in apps or otherwise, you can incorporate some pretty cool functionality to offer utility and personalization into your email program. And not to mention, you're going to get some novelty points as well as an opportunity to drive more revenue. In this example from Vans, they're leveraging Movable Ink's geo-targeting app to key off the IP at the time of open to provide a map of the closest stores so that the subscriber can go out and buy the products they're seeing in the email above. They could try it on in person, make sure it looks good, and hopefully close the deal there. And what's neat here to me is that it really takes that 2D static nature of email and makes it come alive, in real time. Because if you were to open this in, at LaGuardia or JFK, here's the nearest Vans stores, the nearest retailers where I could buy these Vans products. Put my phone in airplane mode, get on the plane, open it back up at LAX or what have you. When I do that, I'm going to have a whole new set of stores nearby, which is kind of fun technology, and you could get creative and have some fun with that. And I think we've executed a number of campaigns with Movable Ink and/or Live Clicker with similar functionality, and it's been really cool to see the effect on these programs, particularly around engagement and ROI. And sometimes you roll out with one of these partners, and it takes a little while to kind of really dial it in. So have some fun with it. I think it's good for maybe newer promotions, things where you really want to stand out in the inbox and make an impression on your subscribers. And I think as time moves on, we're going to start seeing these technologies more and more in our inbox, particularly as costs decrease and it can fit into the email marketer's budget. I think you've done a number of these as well.
I have. I believe done 3 of these.
Oh, cool.
And they're not terribly complicated to implement, especially Movable Ink makes it, I don't want to say painless, but they do make it relatively easy to take a snapshot of the code and plug it in and test into it. Geolocation, just the technical details of that, is a little complicated. What if you don't have a store in that area? So there's you have to get some thought to what are the preferences, what's the radius that you want people to actually see a store within their location. So if I land in San Diego and there's a store in LA, is it really conceivable that they're going to get in a car and drive to LA.
Yeah.
And that may not be the case, so it's providing that threshold or that little bit of difference where you've got something that's providing a really cool experience, but it's really kind of novelty sake cool, or is it really functional, helping me with my day-to-day kind of cool. So that would be my my word as far as implementing that.
Yeah, I think in the end it does give the ability to get really creative and try new things. So I think it's really limited by how much fun and what you could provide your audience. So I'm sure there's 100 different ways that you could create utility and functionality, while creating the wow factor, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and don't ever underestimate the wow factor.
That's true.
Just from the standpoint of whether it be geolocation or how you implement a coupon, passbook, however you want to implement that, it's the wow factor part is the part that keeps people coming back to the email, and why they would open it again, and why they would be interested in it, and why they would be interested in your brand. So all of those come back to not just the story that you're telling, but what a cool story that you're telling.
Good call. All right, guys. Well, it looks like we're at the home stretch of this webinar. So let's recap our learnings and open up some questions if we got a little time. So, as we discussed, smartphones have fundamentally changed the way we as a society or even as a species live. And that fundamental change permeates to email and how we interact with it today. I said it earlier, mobile, it really is the new norm. And with that comes a shift in what people expect when they open and engage with your email. No longer is the email experience a novelty. It is an expectation. And, if you're not really bringing it, it's going to reflect poorly, not only in your engagement rates, but as, your overall brand perception at large. And despite the fact that there are thousands of device email client combos out there, the consumer really only cares about how your email looks on their device. And with no single device dominating that space, it's critical that your design renders well across the board. And the only way to feel confident that you've done this is by testing and then testing again. So, first takeaway there is just, do what you can. Do your homework, do your research, understand your audience, create, formulate a mobile strategy, and then test. Leverage email on asset, litmus, see how it looks like on these variety of clients and devices. And like I said, you're going to have to choose the strategy for your resources and skill set. Is it going to be the well thought out and designed one-size-fits-all strategy or the fluid responsive strategy? So taking a good look at your program and the best way to deliver your message, again, telling, what's your story, how are you going to tell that story, and then pair that with, you and your team's strengths and go from there. And again, if you're unsure, it never hurts to test. If you want to see, let your performance metrics, be your guide, I guess.
Yeah, I can't second that enough. Is that many times we let the overwhelming side of things stop us. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this because I don't want to break something, or I don't want to see a failure. But yeah, I would recommend that most people, great, go try it. Test it, give it a whirl. If it doesn't work, you can. It's not harming anything, so to speak. I mean, there's certainly some negatives in there, but you definitely want to stay within brand and try to present the best that you can. And if you're venturing into uncharted territory, then tread lightly and always come up with a fallback plan.
Yeah. And if you're a BH client, you always got your account manager or access to John here, so
we got you covered.
And lastly, in a world where the only constant is change, keep an eye out for new technologies and how you could leverage them in your programs. And we didn't really talk about this before, but never underestimate the wow factor. I think that's really important. And we've discussed geo-targeting and passbook, and they're kind of a bit of wow now, and we'll see what happens next in the space. There are always so many cool things being done, so keep an eye out, have fun, and continue to push that envelope. And that about wraps it up. This is, again, the fifth of 6-part webinar series. I think that we'll be doing this again on the 5th. Man, that's coming up. Got to get to work. And we'll be talking about email, social media, and text messaging and how that all kind of interrelates and commingles, and kind of go through what our respondents said about that, and maybe provide some cool examples of what other brands in the space are doing.
Cool. Well, all right. Thank you, Brian and John, for the presentation today. Before we get into questions, just wanted to remind everyone about our Twitter contest. It's time for the Twitter topic for today. So as a reminder, to enter the contest here, you'll have to respond to the topic. I will give that to you in just one moment. Once you do that, please tweet your response to @BlueHornetEmail within 24 hours using the hashtag 2014 email stats. The topic for today's webinar is name one key factor to consider when developing a mobile email strategy. Looking forward to your tweets. All right, so we've got a lot of questions coming through. First, do you recommend putting the call to action button above the fold, or is it best to have a hero image at the top and the call to action at the bottom when talking about a mobile strategy?
Fair question, and I would reference a number of articles that are out there. So we all know that there's a lot of different devices that are out there that have a lot of different screen sizes, and with those screen sizes you have this moving theory of where the fold is. So my personal theory is that it's not where the fold is, it's what you want them to take action on first. So when I open up that email, the first thing that I see needs to be the first thing that I'm most likely going to take action on. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to stop them from scrolling, but it's going to be the top of mind. Oh, look, the first thing is X promotion with a button, with a call to action, with a great image. In whatever order that might be, that's the first right of refusal right there. It just commands my attention. And then after that, then I start looking at, oh, these are the secondary offers. And I may be flipping and scrolling. Everybody watch behavior on phones, look at your spouse, significant other, friends, whatever. Man, they just kind of fly north and south, flipping all over the place in email. So where the fold is kind of doesn't matter. It's, we'll call it more of an attention. Mm-hmm. Well, what is top of mind? What do you want them to take action on? And don't be afraid to fit within that first screen, but always validate what that first screen is going to be.
I think it has to have context, right? Like if you just put your call to action button and that's all they see when they open up their email, it's like, well, this really doesn't mean anything to me. You almost need to draw them in a bit.
Right. It's kind of like saying get 20% off. Mm-hmm. Off of what? Yeah. What am I getting 20% off of? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a little bit more to this. And maybe there is, hey, get 20% off of, I can think of a Jamba Juice promotion. It was, hey, buy one, get one free. So this BOGO offer clearly had a smoothie, and then it said buy one, get one free. And then down below from there was where the actual actionable items were. But that top was very stage setting to me. Oh, that's right. I need to take my son there and go get a smoothie. So
totally.
Awesome. Well, I think we only have time for one more question. We're getting close to wrapping up here. So the last question, how do you think subject lines should change considering your mobile audience? Should that change your strategy? Should you have subject lines that are shorter, more playful? What are your thoughts on that?
I think based on the brand, I would answer the question based on brand. I would say how playful I would be or not. I wouldn't imagine that IBM would be playful like a Lululemon or a JBL might be. So based on your brand, then I would answer the question how playful or how engaging my subject line might be. In the mobile device, knowing that subject line only shows up in the preview, it doesn't necessarily impact the message itself. So do I repeat that and use that as a snippet or a pre-header, or do I change my pre-header to reiterate the offer? There's a couple of components in there, but I would say subject line, always important. That first X number of characters, again, by testing and looking at the devices that you're targeting or the screen that you're targeting, might be a better way to say that, then I can say, oh, well, getting that 20% in the first 50 characters is way more important than getting it in the last 250 characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think read somewhere, I'm trying to get the exact number, but now that there's an iPhone 6 and it's even wider, it's always going to vary, and then you have Android, but maybe taking a look at the lowest common denominator there, and maybe creating a strategy around that. It's better than having something that's just going to run on into the ellipses, going forward. And absolutely take advantage of that snippet. Have that interplay between that and the subject line to drive that open.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Kind of spurred a whole bunch of design comments in my head. Lowest common denominator. So in email, the lowest common denominator is X. Whatever is the most trouble spot, the most complicated for rendering, that's your lowest common denominator. Now that's going to be wildly different if you're talking about webmail, if you're talking about a desktop client, or if you're talking about a mobile device or a small screen. So I would look at each one of those in this scenario of, what's my lowest common denominator based on my audience?
Yep.
And then say, how do I need to affect that or change that or address that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, John. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. If you have any additional questions that we weren't able to answer in today's webinar, feel free to reach out to us at BlueHornetCommunications@BlueHornet.com. We'll be sending out the recording of this webinar as well as the slides in the next few days. As a reminder, we only have one more webinar left in our series. If you haven't registered yet, please do so by going to resources.bluehornet.com/consumerviews. Again, our last webinar will be held Wednesday, November 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll be digging into social media and text messaging as it relates to email. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.